Well, for the week 5, presenting like a major assignment, I decided to go old school with my research on elocution and went ahead and went with books, old books. So I found 2 fantastic book resources available on Google Play, which allows you to read books online. They've actually been digitally published, scanned, and you can read them for free. What I found was book number 1, which is Rhetoric, or the Principles of Elocution and Rhetorical Composition, which was published in 1830, and also Elocution Manual, Principles for Elocution with Exercises and Notations for Pronunciation, Intonation, Emphasis, Gesture, and Emotional Expressions, which was published in 1887. So these books were published as technology was expanding, as the middle class was expanding. So basically, what is elocution? Well, elocution is basically teaching or the study of proper communication through correct I'm not even pronunciating very well right now. Correct pronunciation, grammar, inflection, tone, and posture, which is nonverbal communication. So it was taught to educate, as I said, a growing middle class, while Industrial Revolution and mass technologies were creating classes that needed the skills to be able to communicate properly in society to grow. The author Dr. Samuel Willard, which was the author of Rhetoric and Principles of Elocution, stated that elocution is to be understood, the pronunciation of sentences either in reading or speaking, and that principles of elocution apply to both spoken and written communications. So I'm going to give you an example of some of these fundamentals that Dr. Samuel's formation of voice principle would include: that speech is well formed, that speech is at a correct pace with correct pause, and that it also includes inflections and intonations. So I'm going to give you an example of what would be right use of formation of voice under Dr. Samuel's principles, and what would be incorrect by reading a famous quote. So tell me what the difference between these 2 ways of reading this show how elocution helps communication. Winston Churchill: success is not final, failure is not fatal, it is the courage and continue that counts. Let's try that again. Winston Churchill stated, "Success is not final. Failure is not fatal. It is the courage to continue that counts." As you can see, the speech was formed with pauses. It had a correct pace. The listener could follow what was going on in that second example. The first example was a lot of stuttering. It was monotone. There wasn't inflection. It's easier to understand the emotion and intent behind what the spoken word with those accommodations. Dr. Samuel also presented that a principle of elocution should be quantity of sound. What that means is that it should not be too loud, it should not be too soft, it should be normal conversation appropriate. So I'm going to read another famous quote, and I'm going to give you 2 variations of poor quantity of sound, and then we're going to do it the right way and see if there is a difference in how well this is being communicated. Frank Lloyd Wright: "I'm all in favor of keeping dangerous weapons out of hands of fools. Let's start with typewriters." So there's an example number 1. Let's try it again. "I'm all in favor of keeping dangerous weapons out of the hands of fools. Let's start with typewriters." That doesn't really work very well either. That's not a normal communicational voice. I wouldn't be yelling that. So this is more appropriate. Frank Lloyd Wright states, "I'm all in favor of keeping dangerous weapons out of the hands of fools." Let's start with typewriters. Although I did mess up a little bit there, you can see that the way the inflection, the tone, and basically the decibel volume was correct for normal conversation. The author of the Elocutionary Manual, which is Alexander Melville Bell, speaks of a theory or part of elocution that would be vocalization needs to be proper vowel and consonant pronunciation. You know, I personally see this in accents often. One I didn't realize myself is that us Northwesterners don't think that we have an accent. And since I've been going to Plymouth, anytime I've spoken to someone, you know, on the phone or by Skype, it's interesting because I hear your New England accent, but you guys can also tell that I have an accent and it doesn't register with me. But you'll notice that that still happens today, and I'm going to give you an example of that. In the Northwest, this is how we might read this sentence. I'm going to say it how we might say it just and not even think about it. You'll notice I'm missing proper vowel and consonant pronunciations. You guys want to drive over the mountains? Does that sound weird to you? What I'm saying there, if I actually enunciate everything properly, is, do you guys want to drive over the mountains? I was missing a lot of consonants and vowels in that. It just becomes the normal. You'll hear in the South, they'll say y'all. Here we say you guys, or, you know, mountains is a big one. We don't say the T. We don't accentuate the I and the A. It's mountains. So that's another form of elocution in the style of need for pronunciation of vowels and consonants. Mr. Melville also states that emphasis is extremely important to the meaning and construction of words into sentences. So if you emphasize something wrong, then it's going to be taken out of meaning possibly from what you're intending to say. I'm going to give you an example of that. I'm going to say the exact same words in the same order, but I'm going to put emphasis in different places, and it will give different meaning to it. So, for instance, I'm impressed by your attitude. Or I could say, I'm impressed by your attitude. It's a little bit different meaning, just by putting emphasis on a different word in a different place of the sentence. Finally, both authors speak of the importance of motions or posture. And what we're studying now, we call it nonverbal cues. So I'm going to explain to you, to give you an example of why posture or motions, or as we call it nonverbal cues, is so important. I'm going to explain why I think this assignment is so important to me, because I really do believe it is, and see if you believe me or not. This assignment is really important because it teaches us a lot about where communication has come from and how it has changed with society, and it's just really important to understand how we've evolved, not only in class sectors, but how our communications have changed. So that's not very convincing, is it? What gestures were I, was I crossing my arms, not giving eye contact, fidgeting, those types of things? Those are distractions. Those are something that in elocution was taught that needed to be basically complementing what you're trying to express. Elocution is just as important today as it was during the Industrial Revolution. It's just called different things now, I believe. Everything we're learning in communications, as communications majors, we are utilizing some of the fundamentals of elocution to execute in our modern day technology.